And good afternoon to those of us who still have nerves left in our body after that game, which was, as we said just before we came on air, a nail biter to say the least. I'm Macca for American Scouser TV. I'm joined by Rami, or Rami. How
Rami.
do we? Rami, yes. I knew I get it in 50% of the time. Yes, 2-1 to Liverpool. Not an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. Rami, what did you think of it?
I'm just happy with the win, to be honest. I think that's some good momentum that we can carry moving forward. It was a little bit, nerve-wracking the last 20 minutes, just holding on for dear life. But I saw some glimpses in there that, kind of reminded me of the old Liverpool of, that intensity, that pressing, that, even holding possession against a good team. I think, like I said, I definitely saw glimpses that kind of give me a little bit of hope that this team can regain and find its form. That being said, that doesn't mean that there's not some warning signs or some troubling issues. But I'll take what we can get, and these are massive 3 points.
Um, it was almost not a game of two halves, but a game of two halves of two halves. It was like we started off really well in the first half, and then it kind of once we got the goal sat back, and then the second half Spurs came out with the blocks, but then gradually we kind of got our defensive control to end the game strong. But yeah, there are warning signs that we're still not out of that consistency slump, really. Yeah, are we?
Yeah, exactly. And I think finding that is what's going to be key to making a successful season. If we just keep going through these periods through games, I think we're going to struggle this year as we've seen so far. I think once we can find that something to latch on to, that bit of consistency, like I said, then we'll start to see the results come in. But like you said, it's hard when during the game you're going up and down with your performance. It's hard to get that consistency. So I hope we can sort it out, whatever it is the specific issues are. Maybe it's a break that's needed in the World Cup or whatever. But like I said, I'm happy that those glimpses are returning, though. I'm happy to see Nunez start to look more comfortable with the team, and Mo is starting to score again. So I think we'll hopefully figure it out. But it's good to just like I said, get those 3 points in hand.
Speaking of Nunez, it occurred to me during the game that he's almost becoming a pivotal and hugely important player to us. Maybe not on the goals front, although he's not shy of scoring goals right now anymore. But he pops up almost everywhere where he's needed. He's up in the attack, and then he's back down in defense, clearing the ball out for corners and throw-ins. It's a complete turnaround from where he was the first 3 or 4 games of the season, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's a tribute to Klopp. You can give that testament, helping him adjust, finding his role. But I think, like you said, yeah, it's a completely different team when he's not on the field or on the pitch. I remember what game it was. It was, I believe, it was the Leeds game where he didn't play, and we're just trying to lob balls into the box. There's no one there. So he just gives us that threat, and also his intensity, his pressing, like you said, his sprint backs. I think not only is it good for him, but I think it lifts the rest of the team. When they see their striker come back and defend, it kind of gives them a lift. That's like, okay, yeah, we can all do this. So yeah, I think just give him more time, and he's only going to get better. That's what the crazy thing is. He's only 22, so and he's still learning English, all of these things. So I think we give him some more time. He's gonna be really good, but it's really good to see those glimpses of him that just he brings that intensity and that energy. Let alone all the stuff he does with the ball, like setting up Mo today, or creating chaos. So I think I'm really excited to see what's to come from him.
And speaking of learning English, obviously he can join those classes with Andy Robertson, who's probably taking the same classes to learn English as he is. But in terms of Salah, as you said, back on the scoreboard again, but it seems apparent to me that his game has changed, whereas before, almost as skillful as he was, relied hugely on his pace. At the moment, it's almost like he's focusing more on his creativity than the actual speed. What do you think?
Yeah, and I'm been wondering the whole season because I noticed that too. If that's a system change, if that's intentional, or if he's just kind of taking that upon himself to do that. Either way, I think he's been largely successful at it, which is good. People might say he's had a bit of a bad run of form this season, but I think he already has 14 goals, I believe, this year. So I don't think that's a bad run of form by any means. Maybe for his standards, yes, but with the players that we have in this team, we kind of do need him to be a more creative role, especially when games that Thiago or Trent might not be playing. But I think also what he's been really good at this year is being more of a poacher. Like you said before, he's been more skillful, dribble through or cut inside on his left foot and curl it in, stuff like that. But today, both his goals kind of felt just right place, right time, just being having that nose for goal. And so I think that's where he's been really successful this season, as well as his creative side, which I'm not sure if it's still true, but earlier this year he had the most chances created in the whole league, more than De Bruyne or all these creative types of players. So, like I said, I don't know if that's a system change or if he, brought it upon himself to become more involved in the team. But I think it's welcome for sure. At first, I was a little bit tentative or hesitant about it, but I think as we start to get more of our players back and our pieces back, Diaz and Jota come back from injury and Nunez settles in more, I think that's going to be a great role for him in the team.
We're going to be joined now by Timuchin. Timuchin, how are you?
What's happening, man? All good
It's
now. I mean, it wasn't maybe like 20 minutes ago, but
it was
all
yes,
good
it
now.
was a nail biter.
I know you're Mr. Prediction, but I did call this exact score and exact painful. I don't know why I do this to myself, but I knew it was going to be like this. I mean, that game could have gone either way, though, right? I mean, if we get a third, it probably goes the totally other way, but I don't know. I think I'm more frustrated that it should have been probably easier in the second half than it had to be, and I kind of put that on Klopp. I was kind of really like more frustrated why we just kept watching this team get more and more tired as the second half went on instead of doing anything. But hey, it's huge 3 points. Beat Southampton, get another three is all you can do. Stumble to the World Cup, and then we see what happens after that.
Well, we all know how bad my predictions are. So, to be fair, my prediction would have been for Ray Clements to score a hat trick. So we know we're not losing out any money there on that if you follow my predictions. We were just talking about there with Rami that Nunez is becoming almost a more focal point to the team. He's almost doing the old Roberto Firmino job where he's helping out in defense and he's popping up in attack. And it's really good to see him finally get comfortable with what he's supposed to be doing at the team, isn't it?
Dude, I mean, he has the only thing. Okay, so I'm Mr. Negative, right? So I'm gonna give you that. I think he is a very dangerous dude because of the speed and physicality. You can kind of tell there were so many chances because I think that's one thing he has over Bobby. He might not have the interplay, but people are afraid of him when you're defending them. There were so many opportunities today where like he has the ball and you see one defender go towards him and then you have another defender looking to see what's going to happen and kind of like pay attention to him. And when you have, like a guy like Mo on the field at the same time, obviously that creates a lot of space. And obviously you're going to have like Jota, Diaz and stuff like that. The only downside that I see, especially when he's on the left-hand side is, and I'm hoping like once Diaz gets back and Diaz goes left and Nunez becomes center, this won't be a problem. But he gets out of position very easily when he's like making these runs because he wants to impact the game and he'll make a run. And if the ball doesn't go there, now he's totally out of position. I was really worried for Robertson in the first half because there were a lot of times where they would shift that ball over and Nunez was nowhere to be seen. It didn't hurt this time, but I'm sure there's a lot of people looking at tape, if you will, of this game and kind of saying, hey, that's the way to attack wherever Nunez is playing. But going forward, I mean, his speed, his strength, people are afraid of the shots. That also opens a lot of space. He's a guy that not only will get a ton of goals, I think he will create a ton of goals.
Just to kind of run with that a little bit and throw it to Rami, to counter it, I would say with a midfield that is not the most creative in the world, that don't really create space themselves, is it possible that Nunez makes those runs because he has to find that space, even if it takes him out of position?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I don't think he's getting the right service that he needs. Even like you said, Robertson down the left side, he's kind of isolated. There's not really anybody there. So I think he's trying to create space and make those runs in. And I think once we have a more healthy team, like you said, Diaz back and Mo in kind of his right position, he'll be in those spaces where he needs to be. And I think it's kind of a bit of a learning curve for him just coming into a new team. That's why I'm not that concerned about it, especially because on the left he's kind of out of position. I think he's more natural. He did play there for Benfica a bit, but I think he's more natural through the middle. So I'm not that concerned about it. I think with time and like you said, with midfield reinforcements and he gets better service. I mean, if we had Kevin De Bruyne in our team, I'm sure he would have double the goals that he has now. So I think he'll come good in time. Just once you have a better cohesive team around him.
I think if we had Kevin De Bruyne in the team, I'd have double the goals I have now as well. But just to stay on the midfield a little bit, back to Timuchin. Here's my thought during the game, and see if either of you agree. Thiago stunk the place out. Thiago is not the player to have when the other team is in possession of the ball. He's really the one where they're sitting back and letting us dictate the play. But today, he was almost a non-entity, wasn't he, Timuchin?
And that's what kind of like gets to me. That's what I was more like really aggravated throughout the second half, because you're exactly right. When we looked at the midfield, like when we were talking in the pre-match with Gally, we expected a Tottenham team that's going to sit back. And, obviously they started the game like that. You get the early goal, and that's okay. Like Thiago is useful there to break down a defense, right? You get the goal, you get another goal, you have a 2-0 lead. Okay, you start the second half. You knew 5 minutes into the second half that Tottenham was going to go for it. They came out. Now they were going to attack. And that's when you need a guy like Henderson more, because who can defend and then maybe play the long ball to like Mo and, like Nunez and take advantage of that way. I mean, Thiago jogged more than half the second half. Like he kind of like makes this, let me get this. And that's why he's always sliding, because I feel like he's always like half a step behind. That might look great, but whenever you're sliding, it's usually because you're half a step behind, like half a second behind. So once the ball goes away from him, you could kind of see on that side, especially, they had a lot of chances because you had Nunez on that side, you have Thiago on that side. Neither are really tracking. And I know Ellison was like yelling at Robertson all the time to stop the delivery, but whose delivery? There's like 3 guys there anytime they can cross the ball. How Thiago did not come out of that game and how Klopp kept watching that is mind-boggling. And then people I mean, I love Klopp too, but you got to call it when you freaking see it. I mean, it wasn't FSG's freaking fault today that midfield was non-existent. You got to get the fresh legs in there. You got to get somebody in there. I don't care how bad they are. They're fresher. And you did not need Thiago over there to break down a defense and play his cute passes. That thing was done. That part of the game, mission accomplished. The second part of the game was kind of like defending a bit better and starting a counter. And we couldn't even defend, so that you couldn't stand a counter because we kept having to boot it out and stuff. I don't know if it comes across, but I'm extremely freaking frustrated for having to watch Thiago minute after minute. And then the goal comes. It's like, wow, that's a fucking shocker, huh? I mean, that goal was screaming that it was going to come. And we still kept watching Thiago and made a different substitution. And I know Elliot was out too, but I kind of expected maybe Hando for Thiago and then maybe Carvalho for Elliot if you wanted to get some like fresh legs and creativity and attacking and speed. But yeah, extremely frustrated. I think Thiago, like you're saying, it's more like a specialty player where you need him in those games where you're going to break down a team, but when you're going to be defending for your life, you don't want him out there.
On the other hand as well, Rami, as complacent and half a step late as he was in defense, Thiago's passes, it seemed to me, were dropped short in the first half almost regularly and putting his teammates in trouble. Is that something you saw yourself, or was he at least effective in the attack?
Yeah, I did notice that as well. I don't think he was as precise as he usually is. He's usually, pinpoint. That's his thing, is his across the field passes, all of that. And I just didn't think that he had that today. I hope it's just, one off, and next week he's going to be back at it. And I think more than that, like, losing the ball is one thing, but, not running, not tracking back, walking around is a bigger issue for me. Those passes, he might just be having an off day, but that is an excuse, not putting in the effort defensively. I also want to say, not to change the topic, but I think Fabinho was really good today. I think he deserves some credit, especially with how bad he's been the past, few weeks. I think he kind of marshaled that midfield. I think even defensively he was very solid. So, we criticize players when they're performing bad. I think we need to give Fabinho his due, because I think he was been out of form recently, and I think it started with Napoli. He played better, and I think he built on it today too.
I think we could all 3 of us agree with that. He definitely held the midfield together, and it was needed almost. But to go with his compatriot, another possibly controversial one, Timuchin, Firmino also stunk the place out today. I thought his contributions in general were poor, and it looked like he probably would have preferred to be rested. What do you think?
not the usual Bobby, right? Especially like in interplay and stuff like that. But I noticed, especially in the first half, when you go look back at the game, I even like mentioned on the Discord channel. If you look at the first half, there's so many times he's getting open, like coming to the left hand side, and the ball goes to the other side. He was visibly frustrated and like making hand gestures, like I freaking came here, and he was wide open. He created that space and did not get the ball. One thing that I will give credit for, because I'm a huge Bobby fan, but we just talked about Thiago, and I think that goes back to what like Rami was talking about earlier. You have to give extra credit to Fab today. He was not maybe great when it's passing and stuff like that moving forward, but in that middle, because of Thiago, you had to have Bobby and Fab put twice the shift and run twice as much to close gaps. So you have to give Bobby the credit there. And I think, he did wear down. You could tell visibly he was. I mean, there were some players out there you could physically see. I mean, we can freaking see they were getting tired. How Klopp does not see that, I don't get, or how Klopp does not react to that, I don't get. I mean, you could visibly see it. And why didn't we substitute? I mean, you see, I don't care who's coming in. Put fucking Nat Phillips up there if you have to up top. At least it's somebody with fresh legs. But you saw like Ox come in and sprint all over the place. Jones, meh, I guess. But still, like getting fresh legs over there, especially on the attacking side, when we're defending, why we watch Bobby struggle, I know. But I think his main struggles came from trying to get the ball a lot in the beginning and not running all over the place. And then, like I say, doing twice the work in the second half. But yeah, definitely not. You would think against the Spurs team that kind of came out, you have Bobby behind, Mo and Nunez, that we would create a lot more, and we just did not.
For both of you, and just to stick with Fabinho a little bit more, we've talked before, Timuchin, on the various podcasts, whether it was the morning coffee or whether it was the Thursday for me, or I've heard it on the Monday podcast as well, for the Monday crew, that Fabinho is really suited to when the other team is pressing us and trying to create around us. So this was almost a game made for Fabinho, wasn't it? Because he didn't have to be creative. He just had to do his job of breaking up the opposition attacks. So it's almost like if we could get our horses for courses, our midfield would be a little bit better, wouldn't it? Timuchin, start with you.
Yes, is the short answer. And I think one thing that I noticed is this, we went to more of a 4-3-3. And I really think it fits Fab a lot more. He feels a lot more comfortable. I don't think he has ever gotten comfortable with that double pivot thing. And you can kind of tell. Maybe it's because, kind of going back to what you're saying, it's asking him to do things he's not comfortable doing or he's not good at doing, compared to, like what he does now in this role, where he's kind of like sweeping it up, almost like right in front of the defense. So yeah, I think more his role than anything else kind of like helps him play better. He feels a lot more comfortable doing what he does. And going back to, we talked about this before about how like Klopp is very hesitant to change things, like why with the midfield shortage we never swapped it and stuff like that, because I think some of these players are really used to how we play and they're not able to adjust. Because I think it was in his like pre-match press conference a couple of games ago when he was talking about, during the World Cup they can work on different things and then try different things afterwards. And I think he feels like there isn't enough time now, and these guys are not able to say, oh, that's how we're playing now, that's cool, because they just can't make that switch.
Going to Rami, it was an important 3 points. Jamie says it's a massive 3 points. But the telling thing was that we got through the hard grind, and that mentality monsters thing was back for one game only, as they would say. Hopefully not, but that's been the case this season. So, Rami, do you think we're almost on muscle memory in terms of that mentality, or do you think it's something still really present in the team?
I saw something today, and I don't know if this should make me concerned or happy, but it seems that when we play big teams, we rise to their level. We that mentality, like I said, I don't know if it's muscle memory or because we played in so many big games, but we just, because I think it was away and against Tottenham, our mentality was just kind of win this game no matter what. I don't think we have that mentality every game, and that's what's frustrating. You see, like we're playing small teams, like we saw last week against Leeds or the week before against Nottingham. We just came, sleepwalk through games, but if we can find that consistency mentally, I think that's where the consistency in form and play will come from. It's just a little bit frustrating that it's not there every week, and I think that's also on Jurgen too. I think that's another criticism of him, that he hasn't been able to instill this in the players every single week. In years past, it was never a question about mentality or want or drive, but this year we've been questioning the mentality of these players, and I think that comes down to coaching at the end of the day.
Tamucha, what do you say?
I think it's partially coaching. I do agree with that, but I think it's kind of like, you look at those games. This is a team that is lacking in confidence overall. So how they begin games is very important. I mean, you see how the game starts positive and it's a lot easier to flow, because you could kind of tell in the second half when things kind of like the turntables turned, that lack of confidence and doubting themselves came back in, where there's a lot of like, oh, I thought you got it, me got it. Even in with being like Konate and Van Dijk and stuff like that, you saw like a lot of things that you probably don't want to see, where everybody's afraid to make a mistake and stuff like that. I think when we do not get that, and that's been the problem, is the only part of the coaching I would agree to in terms of mentality is how we have started the games really slow. And then once you concede, well, that's where the confidence issue is not coming into play, and you're chasing games. That is not the way to go. But yeah, it is kind of frustrating, right? To see you beat City, beat Tottenham away, and then lose to Leeds and Forest. It's like, what the?
It seems though on the coaching side that I've never agreed that coaches bring confidence, like that kind of confidence to players. It's something that comes from the mentality, pardon me, not the confidence, the mentality. Most of it has to come from them, and all the coach can really do is create the culture that maintains that. But on the other hand, I think we've said this before, to mention that sometimes the voice is the same voice and the message is the same message, and players begin to tune it out almost, not deliberately, but they've heard it before, so they can kind of coast. We don't want to change the manager, because that's obviously one sure way to change the message and the voice. But is it really, 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 really time for a complete refresh of sections of the team?
Yeah, because it's different ears listening to the same message now, right? Because to those guys, it's not the same message; it's a new message. So as you have these guys, it's important to have a guy like Henderson and Milner and stuff in there in terms of leading by example and helping out the young guys and stuff like that. But I think we've gotten kind of like twofold, where we've either gone like with older guys or really young, talented guys, but then we say, well, he's not ready yet. Okay, well, we have to find some depth in the middle there, like mid-20s semi-experienced guys that do not maybe need Milner and Henderson to kind of like constantly prop them out and get comfortable, blah blah blah, and then slowly give the young guys the opportunities, because I think we're kind of setting them up for failing too when you kind of like throw them out there and give them big roles maybe they're not ready for yet. So I agree. I think, changing, and that's why I think winning teams, and that's the biggest criticism we've had, is winning teams kind of keep adding pieces, swapping out pieces to keep that locker room fresh. Not only competition, people only see it as like competition. Yeah, you're not going to get somebody like, better than like Mo to push him, but you're going to keep Mo fresher. You're going to have another person who's trying to prove themselves and doing things. So it kind of like lets the team going. I think this is where we get to that point where, we give credit to Klopp for building this culture. And a lot of it comes from loyalty and team building and stuff like that. But there's a very fine line when sometimes that loyalty, I think, backfires, and we have people in the squad that is really not contributing anything, not even depth, because we can't either trust them or they're hurt or whatever the case is. So it's kind of like a fine line. And I think that's when maybe somebody else has to step in and be like, hey, man, I know you love him, but we need another midfielder, and then get some like young bodies in there that have experience and not just financial opportunity buys that we did with like Taki and stuff.
Rami, Tamuchin mentioned Milner there, and kind of to contradict my own question earlier, like Milner is never less than 100% when he goes on the field. There's a story about Bill Shankly, whenever in the 60s, whenever anybody came into his office to ask why they weren't playing, he'd always say, well, Ian Callaghan's playing. He hasn't been dropped. Why hasn't he been dropped? Because he brings it in every single game he plays. Is it a case, do you think, that motivation is a choice and maybe some of the younger players aren't mature enough to understand that, and then the older players are just tired at this point of having to do it week in, week out?
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought of that. Maybe just the young players aren't, don't even know how to do that, to do those things, to have that mentality, because they weren't around when we won all these trophies. Players like Carvalho or even Nunez, new players who weren't really around for those things. And as for the old players being tired, I really hope not. I hope that, winning doesn't get old to you, and you don't if it does, then this isn't the club for you. I think you have to have that mentality day in and day out. And I think Milner is the consummate professional. I think that's why they keep him around at age, whatever, 37, 38, and they keep extending his contract.
He's 62, Rami. He's
Yeah.
62 years old.
Retirement age, yeah.
It's all that Ribena and ironing that keeps him young.
100%, yeah. But yeah, I think he's a consummate professional. I think he's a good player to keep around because of that. Like you said, his mentality doesn't waver. And so, sorry, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're saying that, we might not have somebody in the locker room who's, instilling that at the same level. Is that basically what you're saying? Because I think that's true. I think there is maybe a bit of leadership that's lacking. Even seen Henderson, he doesn't look like the same vocal leader that he has in the past. Even Van Dijk is always quick to blame other players. So I don't know if we have necessarily the quality of leadership that we've had in the past. And I don't know if that's a fair criticism or not, because we're not there in the locker room every day. But that's kind of what I felt. And I think that's where I think it was one of you who mentioned that the players have to be the ones who fix the mentality. And I think that is true. As much as we can or want to blame Jurgen, I think that is a good point, that it has to come from the players. So I hope that's a fix that we see soon, but I don't know where it'll come from.
I'm going to move on to something a point that I want to make. But before I get there, because these two thoughts are linked, strangely enough for me, is it possible to mention that when you see players like Naby, when you see Ox to a lesser extent, but I'm going to say Naby, I'm going to pinpoint him just because he just seems to get injured constantly. And nothing seems, it's never a case of, you're gone. We can't deal with it anymore. Do you think there's maybe sometimes a reaction, as there sometimes is for players, to see somebody getting faith put into them when they clearly don't seem to want to be on the field?
I'm not following you there. You're saying
well, I mean, if you're putting in the hours every week in training and you're not getting played, let's say, or you're having a bit part now and again, and then you're watching Naby in the press and maybe in the conversations being hailed as this important player that we can't wait to get back, but he's not showing up because he's always on the injury table. And you're probably thinking, he's faking that a bit. That's I've had injury before. That's not as bad as it was for me. That maybe they're thinking that loyalty thing it's too much. That maybe there's a little demotivation because you can, and I think we can all speak from personal experience in the work environment, the non-sports one, putting in the hours every week and not getting a chance, and then somebody not putting in the hours every week gets plugged straight back in, and you just kind of think, well, why am I bothering? Do you think maybe there's an element where Klopp has to ditch the loyalty and be harsh and ruthless with these players who cannot give us a 30-game season, let alone a 62-game season?
Oh, I mean, he should definitely. I mean, that's, I think it's a couple of seasons late in terms of doing that, to be honest. I don't know if it affects players in terms of motivation, but it can add to the frustration. And we always talk about this, right? Like, the margins are very thin. So even if you're like 5% less motivated just because, something bugs you, because you're like, man, this is when we need you, man. I mean, seriously, like, kind of a deal. And the dude is not there. I think the whole Naby thing is just like, a joke anyway. But you see these other players that maybe are not regularly contributing, and it can probably frustrate you, especially when you're out there with tired legs and you're not able to perform well because yourself, you got the tired legs and you're not really 100% ready to be able to go. So I can see that causing frustration, but I think it's one of those things where when everything is going great, going back to what Rami was saying, like with the leadership, I think when everything is going great, everybody's like, oh, okay. But like, for example, Van Dijk. I mean, Van Dijk screams at Robo on a regular basis for some reason because it's on the side probably. Before it's like, Van Dijk is running the back line, controlling the line, blah, blah. Now it does look more like petulant almost. You're like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be there and stuff like that. So I think, how the results and the gameplay goes affects how we view things. I think these guys have more. I mean, we have more than enough leaders in there, but it goes back to having a couple of newer guys, like you were saying earlier, Mecca, to kind of like freshen things up. Because sometimes, when you're doing the same old, like you talked about, like, like regular work environment, right? It's business as usual. Things kind of tend to get stale, right? And then you get a new guy. Heck, we know with American Scouser, right? You get a new guy like freaking Rami over here, the new contributor, and then they're like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. It gets everybody else going. Not that nobody was like slacking or not putting their effort before, but I think it's kind of like gets everybody a bit more excited again, reboots everybody and clears everybody's mind and gets them a bit more motivated. So I find it the same way when you get a new guy in there, like a Nunez or a Carvalho, who's trying to do things, and you can see like maybe they're over the top, aggressive in trying to get something done. I think that stuff is infectious, as opposed to, walking by the training room every day and freaking see Nabi and Ox over there playing cards.
Just for Rami, just to kind of hop on that thought a little bit, though, as almost as a counterpoint again, is in terms of looking at, Nunez comes in, he does jazz the place up a little bit, but he's not in your line. He's not a threat to your position. And I think almost we're talking about this lack of motivation or the lack of mentality, maybe exclusively in the midfield area rather than the front and the back. We can almost, I think, predict the midfield every week. Yossi Benayoun used to tell a story that, he was always frustrated under Rafa because he would score a hat-trick one week and he couldn't guarantee that he'd be in the next team, and it really dented his motivation. Do you think in the midfield maybe some players have gotten a little bit too comfortable, and maybe we do need that midfield purchase in the winter transfer to kind of spice that up a little bit?
Oh, Rami didn't want to answer that. He was like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, that was a long question, Rami. No,
he walked out of the press conference. He's like, what?
I'm just here so I don't get fined, as they say.
Did you catch that question?
I heard the first half.
So do you think that in the midfield we need that extra player brought in during the winter transfer window to kind of kick their asses a little bit?
I mean, to be honest, I was yelling, screaming from the mountaintops for midfield signing last season. I remember when Saul Niguez from Atletico Madrid went to Chelsea, and I was like, why isn't he coming to Liverpool, even though he didn't have a great season? But I was still like, oh, we were a player short in midfield last summer. So for us not to sign somebody this summer was, to me, felt negligent. Like you said, we've refreshed the front line. We, brought in Diaz and Nunez, or even Jota a couple seasons ago. Our back line, we bring in Calvin Ramsey this summer, and I think special shout out to Konate. I think he had a great game today. But we bring him into and he freshens up that back line. It's just a midfield that's like the same players that we've been using for the last 3 or 4 years. We take out Wijnaldum and put in Thiago, and it's basically the same midfield that we've been using since like 2018. So I've been a huge proponent that we need a fresh face in midfield, even if it's a younger player that's maybe 22, 23, who's, can start games. That's not like too young, like Carvalho and Elliott, but still, is ready enough to start games, and that can develop similar to like a Nunez level signing where, he's not the finished product yet, but he's good enough to start games. Even if it's something like that, just to give our midfielders a bit of a break, bit of, a freshness, a different look. I believe Thiago's the only first team midfielder we've signed in I can't remember how many years. So that's what's most frustrating to me. And it seems, Jurgen Klopp recognized this was an issue early in the summer when he tried to sign Tchouaméni, I believe, before he went to Madrid, so they obviously recognized that this was an issue. So for me, it felt negligent to go into the season without addressing that issue. So hopefully we bring somebody in the winter. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I think that would actually really be a big help.
Maybe Klopp thought that too many cooks will spoil the broth. Now, just before Timuchin's head explodes at that pun, Timuchin, talking of fresh faces, it was great to see Ox back on the field, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And honestly, like I thought, obviously it was like, like a minute plus the 4 extra, if that, but I don't know. I felt like I still think he should be above Curtis Jones in this pecking order. Maybe I'm missing something, but apart from being a Scouse lad, I just don't see anything that you're like, that's why Curtis is in there. Like you don't have a moment in the game where you're like, see, that's why he's in there. Like with any other player, there's like they do something maybe that's unique to them, or like something they do well, and you're like, see, that's why we need him. Like Robertson makes that run down the left hand side. See, he's needed there. We need that pace, whatever. But I never see that with Curtis. I mean, just because he's going to make a couple of like fast feet moves, is that what we were after here? I just don't know what he brings, and I don't know if it's fair because he's never really in the position that he is designed to be in. But this goes back to putting our eggs in a basket where we kind of knew that's not really. There's a reason why you have, like what Rami is saying, you have like your regular midfielders, and then you have the other guys. So you have to address that and bring. It doesn't have to be a superstar. It doesn't have to be a huge signing. I mean, Klopp talks about taking more risks in the like the transfer market. Yeah, but then maybe you should get a guy that's 20, 30 million to be somewhere in the middle, to give some fresh legs, maybe perform even better than you thought he was going to be. Not a lot of the guys we bought were like, oh, I'm glad when we got Robertson, nobody was like, yes, we got Robertson. It's like sometimes you just got to kind of roll the dice. And if it doesn't pan out, you got to move on from the guy. If we don't feel that, Curtis Jones is going to be a starter here in 2 years, and I don't know who does right now, then he probably should not be here. I think with Carvalho, we're like, hey, maybe. Or Elliott, he's already at times a starter. But when you have a young guy where you feel like he's not going to be a starter anytime soon, and he's not young anymore. We've been saying he's young for 4 years, so he's not young anymore for Curtis Jones. It was great to see Ox. I hope that he gets. I mean, hopefully he didn't get hurt over these like the 3-minute shift he put in. But I think he brings something that we lack in that area, and I kind of like expected him to come in. Not expected him, I guess. I didn't expect him to come in. I knew Curtis would come in before him, but I would have preferred him to come in before Curtis.
Rami, let's stick on Curtis Jones for a moment. I've said, we talked about this last week, me and Tamuchin, but I've said for a fair while, Curtis Jones is not a Liverpool level player, and he never will be a Liverpool level player. Do you agree with that statement, number one? And two, if you do agree with that statement, do you think it's time to cut our losses now rather than later?
I agree with the first half of that statement. I don't think he's Liverpool level currently, but I don't want to write him off just yet. I think he could maybe reach that level. I think what he needs is maybe a loan out to maybe a mid-table Premier League team, or even a high level championship team. But it is weird. I don't know if you guys got this impression too, but when he subbed on, he looked completely out of place. He looked like he was just, like if you threw one of us out there and we're like, oh, what's going on? It just felt like he just felt like he didn't fit. And I don't know if that's a technical ability thing or if that's just mentality or what, but like you say, he doesn't look like a Liverpool standard player. And I'm partial to Curtis. Like you say, he's a loyal lad. He comes from the academy. So I'm a bit partial to him, but if this is any other player, I think a lot of us would be saying, yeah, what is he still doing at the team? So I think we need to maybe give him one more chance, let him go prove himself somewhere else. And then, if he comes back and fits with the team, great. But I think at some point in the future, if he doesn't improve, because like you said, we've been saying he's young. That FA Cup goal against Everton was so long ago, and we've been saying he's going to get better, but we've yet to really see that breakthrough yet. So I think if that doesn't come soon, then it will be time to cut our losses.
I mean, we talked about this again, Rami. What I would say, I mean, he's 21 now, heading into his 22nd year, and Harvey Elliott is, I think, younger by 2 years, and about 5 levels better than him. Should we keep Curtis Jones as the standard and then Harvey Elliott as the exception, or should we make Harvey Elliott the standard and then just say Curtis is not going to meet it?
Yeah, I think Elliott should be the standard. I think you find young players at 19 who are ready to step into the team. If at the level we're trying to be at, I think it should be Elliott. I think that's kind of been my one concern with this team is our academy doesn't really produce those gems. We have to go buy them from other teams. So if you're buying these players that are like 17, 18 that you really think can come in and contribute by the time they're 19, 20, by the time your older players are done and out of the team, you'll have a new generation that's right there waiting for them. So I really think that players like Elliott have to be the level if you don't want that drop off, because I think Timuchin, you mentioned it earlier, a lot of our players are, 28, 29, 30s, and then the other half are 19, 20. So if you don't want that drop off to be huge, you need to make sure that those 20-year-old players are actually quality.
But I think that's the frustrating part to me. I'm sorry, like I didn't mean to jump in, but that's the frustrating part to me. Like Dan Curtis, yes, should be loaned out, and there should be another midfielder coming in. When Klopp is counting all these midfielders and says, "Why do we need midfielders beginning of the season?" Then he should not count Curtis as one of those guys. Curtis should be loaned out. We should bring in somebody else in. Best case scenario, Curtis does ridiculously good over there, but you're like, so you either bring him back in or he does pretty good over there, and you'll be able to sell him to somebody because he showed what he can do on a regular basis, week in and week out to people, or he sucks over there and you basically still sell him, but for a lot less, and then you move on from him knowing he doesn't have it. Doing what we do over and over again, where he's coming in the last 10 minutes of games and he's going to show up in a couple of League Cup games and play out of position when we're hurting and when we have too many injuries. It doesn't do Curtis any good. It doesn't do us any good. And it doesn't do the club any good. I mean, so that's why I agree with Rami, but we got to do a lot more of it. Loan these guys out. I mean, I don't expect us to be like Chelsea having like fucking 35 guys out on loan, but we're almost like really shy from it. And let's face it, anytime it's very, very rare that we loan somebody and then we keep him. We always move on from the guy that we loan for the most part. I would say like 90-95% of the time, because it's almost like that's our way of saying you're no hope, kid. If we feel like they have hope, we're like, no, you should practice with us. But then he's not playing. So it's not fair to the kid. He's not going to develop because you're not going to start him over, I don't know, like Hendo or Fab or whatever in the midfield. So you're kind of like curbing his progression and developments, and you're not helping the team. You're screwing up your depth because when somebody does hurt, now you turn to him, but he's not freaking ready because you didn't develop him. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle. I wish we would get out of the cycle. Let's hope January is when we get out.
I think they're very good points. I think it has to be couched, and I think the fact that Klopp said when he came in that he really doesn't like that loan system, I believe, if I remember correctly. He would much prefer to have farm teams where you could just send an entire team of kids out. So I think you're right that we should be sending more out on loan, but it doesn't sound like it's probably going to happen anytime soon. So we're kind of stuck with it. But speaking of farming out entire teams, gentlemen, we have 2 more games left this calendar year. No, not this calendar year, but at least till the end of December. We have the Cup on Wednesday. Yeah, the Cup again on Wednesday at Anfield against Derby, and then Southampton on the weekend, who will probably be managerless at that point, or at the very best case scenario for them, a new manager, with the rumours that Hasenhüttl is about to be fired if he hasn't happened in the last 20, 30 minutes. How do we approach these last 2 games of this cycle? Do we play the kids purely in Derby and the injury returners like Ox, and then put everything into the Southampton game? Or do we accept that our league form is not stellar, so maybe try and get something in the cups?
I can go first. I think.
Oh yeah, go on, Rami.
Sorry, I think I don't want to see anybody over the age of maybe 25 against Derby, because I think we should put as much of a rotated side as we can. It's a good opportunity to. I don't think they're the. I haven't checked their league form, but I don't think they've been doing great this year. So I think we could, that's a good opportunity to give players like Ramsey 90 minutes. I think Kelleher is back. I don't think we've seen him yet this year. Give him, 90 minutes. Just players like that haven't really had an opportunity to play much this year against a team that they should really be beating. And then I think go all out on next week against Southampton. I think getting 3 points today was huge, and the only way to build on that is by getting another 3 points next week.
Timuchin, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you want to see a lot of, because I know what you're saying in terms of like the league form. Like, okay, let's go for the League Cup kind of thing, but you need to be in the top 4 in this league. And if you talk about making signings and stuff, nobody's coming to a team. I mean, or you have to pay over the top, which we will not, to come to, get a player if you're not in the Champions League. So you got to get those 3 points from Southampton and then hope that everybody comes back healthy afterwards. So yeah, I mean, put Ox out there. I don't know if Milner will be less groggy and be ready to go. But yeah, aside from those 2 guys, I agree with Rami. Everybody else should be the younger kids. Get some minutes to Carvalho, and whatever happens. I mean, I'd rather have us. I know it will be a trophy, like we go after and stuff like that. But I think top 4 is a lot more important in the long run as opposed to winning another League Cup and finishing the season 6th.
Although, to be fair, as we've said before to Mooch, and they could have both of us for 2 XL tracksuit each. So I don't know what they're waiting on. They could stick us in midfield, then nobody get past us. But yeah, I think I think that's probably the solid plan, is put the kids in and the players who need the minutes on Wednesday, including Kelleher. Give Allison a break because he got a little bit banged up today in that game. Or it looked like he did. Now, he could have been doing some excellent play acting to waste some time, to be fair. There was a bit of that about it. But I'm all out for Southampton because they're in a funk and you don't know what they're going to be like next week. Although we've seen with Villa, that quick change of a manager can do wonders for your scorelines. So maybe not get what we wish for there and don't put.
That was the only thing about the Southampton news. Why couldn't they wait another goddamn week?
Yeah, seriously. So that we could fire him.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we didn't get to do it.
We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it.
Oh no. To be fair, though, we were saying the same about Jesse Marsh before that game and how we could end his career, and then they won. So maybe it's worked out quite well that they don't have a manager. So now we can actually get back to business as normal.
Sad but true.
Sad but true. But that's it for the post-match reaction. We have the morning coffee tomorrow morning at the normal time of 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. Thank you to Rami and Timuchin for joining us. We have the Monday podcast tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. I can never work out the time zone things here. And then EPL review and fantasy football and Thursday show will be back and all the good stuff. So make sure you like, subscribe, follow us on Spotify, follow us on Instagram if we have Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Mastodon. Toot away on that if you want. If we're there, if we're not, we should be. But either way, a hard-fought win today. Not the best performance, but definitely the best result we could hope for. And we will see everybody soon. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday because the Reds made a good one happen.